Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Wix and back with another video. This time it's gonna be about Windows background services. This video will be the start of a series that I'm gonna make, which will be called Windows Power User or Windows 11 Power User, although most if not all of the things should apply to Windows 10 as well, because they're basic Windows underground things, let's say, basic advanced configuration or things like that. But the first one will be about background services and what they are, why are they there, things like how you can interact with them. So without further ado, let's start. What are background services? Basically, background services are services, processes, programs that run in the background. They don't have UI usually. They can have UI. They could show up right here in your notification bar. For example, if I'm let me show this. Not that. No, actually it works. See this Razer Central? This is the UI of some Razer services. But usually, normally they don't have UI. You can make them have UI like Razer did and many others. But normally it's things that run in the background and they don't necessarily have UI. And why are they needed? Well, because they're always active in the background. They run in the background and they listen to things, what's happening to your PC, or maybe from time to time they need to scan something, or they need to respond to something from the network, stuff like that. One example of how Razer uses one of their services is to sync the colors between your Razer devices. So the keyboard, the mouse, and whatever else you have, they sync the same colors using a background service. Of course, Windows uses a lot of background services. That's one of my problems with Windows. There's too many background services. Linux uses background services as well, but not as many. And most of them are needed, most of them are not needed. We'll get into that a bit later. Let's start with the beginning. Where can you see these background services? Well, there's a couple of ways. The easiest one is to go right-click the taskbar, go Task Manager, and then in Task Manager you will see Processes, and then you go to Services, and this is where you see the services. They have a status. You can sort by status up here. Can I? Yeah, I can. So you can sort by status up here. These are running. There's multiple states of services. The running ones, of course, are running. If you scroll down, there's stopped ones, because usually services can start, do their thing, and then shut down. Don't know why they make them like this, because you could like make a scheduled task that can run at log on and then close itself, but some of them do this. And I think, and then the next status that could be, but I don't see it here, is disabled. So you can have services that are actually disabled and they will never run. I see if Task Manager doesn't show them. Anyway, this is a list of services that are running in your computer. Well, let's see a few examples. Adobe Update Service. This service runs in the background, checks for updates for Adobe products. These are usually Windows services. You can probably even see, no, it doesn't say. Maybe I can configure this. No, it doesn't say who makes them, but I'll show you later. You can see that too. All right, so let's see. DHCP client. Okay, I don't know. I'm bad at zooming screens. DHCP client is you will get an IP from your router in the background when the computer starts or internet goes down and comes back up. This service is responsible for getting you an IP. So basically, usually they're used for event log. It's responsible to log everything that happens in Windows. It's a service that runs in the background. And yes, Windows has a lot. Most of them are needed, some of them not. For example, my VPN services right now are stopped, but whenever I connect to a VPN, it will turn the service on and let it do its work in the background. Another way you can see the services, this is just the easiest way, through Task Manager. And from here you can right click on a service, and then let me zoom in, right click on a service, you can stop and restart them from here. So if I want to, let's say I want to stop all the Razor services from here, I just press R. If I can press R and find the Razor ones, there we go. I can right click, stop, right click, stop, right click, stop, right click, stop. Now if you want to go into more advanced things, like let's say I don't want these Razor services to start every time my PC boots up. I want them to be manually started when I want to use Razor's software, like Razor Synapse. Or I want them disabled to never run again, so I don't have to come in here and click stop every time I reboot my PC. To do that, we're gonna go to a bit of a more advanced UI. You can get to that by right-clicking anywhere in here and go open services, and that will open this UI. It's called services, of course, and this is a full list of services that are on your system, including the disabled and stopped ones. So status missing means it's not running, and you can see here we have a startup type. This defines how the service starts. If it's set to manual, that means it's started whenever you're trying to use a functionality that needs this service. Usually this is fine. You only want services to start when you need them, do their job. Once you close the application that needs a service, it should go back to not running, if you ask me. Trigger start, this is a different, it's still manual, so they only start when they're needed, but they can be triggered by different other things, not just when you start an application, basically. And then you have disabled ones like this one. This means it will never run. I do have a bunch of disabled services because I don't use them. And automatic means they will run every time Windows starts. You start Windows, it will run. That's the statuses of them. And to change the things, let's say, let's go to the Razor example again. If I'm looking here, all of these are running. And let's say I wanna set them to manual, and so they only start when I open Razor Synapse. Right click on the service, go to properties, and you get this window, and then you can change the startup type from automatic, which means every time Windows starts, to manual. You click apply and OK, and then this service will only start when you open the Razor Synapse application. For Razor, it's a bit different because they all start when you open Razor Synapse. I don't know why Razor did it like this. When you start Synapse, all of these services start running, and that's kind of pissing me off. But normally, if you set a service to manual from here, it will only start when an application needs it. Unless it's a Windows service. I would not recommend doing these for Windows services unless you know exactly what you're doing. In Razor's case, I know that I can set them to manual and they will start whenever I open a Synapse. And mostly for third-party application like, oh look, BattlEye is a good example. This one is on manual, see? BattlEye is on manual, which means whenever I open a game that uses BattlEye anti-cheat, this service will start. Otherwise, it stopped. That's manual. So you can manage them from here, right-click properties, and then you can do more than that. You can start, stop, pause the service. You can change the startup type to automatic, manual, or disable to never run. You can do a bit more things like you can set which user from the system the service will run as. Basically, if it needs more permissions in your PC, this user should be one with more rights in your PC. What happens when the service fails? You can set it to restart a few times, or these are more advanced stuff. But this video is only about services and how to manage them. So you get here as I showed, But there's another little trick that you can do to get straight to this window, so you don't have to go to the start to the task manager, go services, go here, stop, and you can't even change the startup time, the startup way. Then you have to go open services and then you get here. It's too long. As a power user, what I do, you press Windows key and R and you get the run window, and then you type services.msc, press enter. I didn't type services, press enter, and then you get this UI straight away, so you don't have to go through task manager. And of course you can sort by status, by startup type, and evaluate. And in this UI, which is why I like this one better, is that you have a description of what it does right here. So of course you should Google every service that you want to turn off, because it might be needed, but usually the Microsoft ones have a good description on them. And if I go to I don't know what's wrong with my zoom, connected, should be some connected, oh, sort by name please. And then if we go to C, there's one called connected something experience. Connected the user experience telemetry. This is the telemetry service that Windows has. You can right click properties on this one, and as you can see, disable all telemetry. Good to know your Windows telemetry. So yeah, read what they do, Google them, see if you can stop them or not. But so far we've covered what services are, what they do, how you can manage them. Let's continue to a bit more, because yeah, I mentioned power user, so this is a bit of a power user, sure, because you need to know where you can find them and what they do and why are they here. And most applications like Razer has background services, even Nvidia has background services. If you check, they have a display container, frame views, SDK service. Some of them are stopped, some of them are working, but yeah, everybody has a background service these days. Even Oculus, OneDrive has background services, so everybody has background services. But for things like Adobe, for example, I don't want those running in the background. I'm updating Adobe whenever I use Photoshop or something. So those services I always keep turned off or not disabled, because you need them when you start Photoshop, but they're set to manual, they never start on their own. For other example is VMware, which is a virtual machine software. It keeps a lot of services in the background. I turn those off too on manual. So basically you're saving some PC processing power by turning off services that you don't need, that were installed by software that, like Razer Central has 6 services in the background. What? Why? So yeah, you can go one by one and click stop, set to manual. You can also right click on the taskbar, go to task manager, and then in task manager over here there's a startup section right here, startup apps, and in here you can disable these services from starting. This is not the same as setting the services in here to manual. It's a different process that you're preventing from running. This in here in the startup apps, this is an actual application. As you can see, this is Razer Synapse 3. So I'm preventing this application to run at startup, but the services that this application uses, they will still run at startup if they are set to run automatically here. So that's the difference. You should always turn off all the applications from startup apps that you don't want to run when Windows boots. For example, I don't know, phone link from Microsoft, don't need that when Windows boots. Don't need Xbox apps, don't need terminal to start when Windows boots, and so on. Don't need Discord to start when Windows boots. Don't need Creative Cloud to run, and a lot of those things. I've disabled a lot of things. because whenever you install something, they get added here. So they start with Windows, and then they start out faster when you click them, but they use processing power in the background with you maybe not even needing them at that point. So yeah, turn off everything in here that you don't need. But this is, I still want to push the point over. This is not the same as stopping the background services for these applications. For the background services, you gotta go here and stop them from here and change the startup type for them. Okay, so we got through those two ways of seeing the services. Now, let's see, are you afraid of the terminal? Power users do use terminals. Don't be afraid of it, it's not hard. Let's open up a terminal. So what I did here is, as I said, I like to turn off services. So if I ls in here, ls just shows you the contents of the current folder I'm in. And you can see I have a bunch of PowerShell scripts that start VMware services, stops the Razer services, stops the VMware services when I'm done with them. This is a different thing. But basically, you can make scripts that you can run from the PowerShell, from the terminal. And instead of going to services.msc, instead of going here for Razer, for example, and going right-click stop, right-click stop, right-click stop, right-click stop, it's too much, right? We're power users. We don't do that here. And instead of doing that, you're gonna make a PowerShell script. And to communicate with services or to manage services from PowerShell, there's a few tools. One of them is get execution policy. First things first, Windows might have a policy set for PowerShell by default to not run any PowerShell scripts on your system. If that's set, then you won't be able to run your own scripts. But you can change that. So you can do get execution policy, press enter, and you will see mine is set to remote signed. Yours might be set to restricted or something, or unrestricted. If it's unrestricted, it's bad. You should set it to remote signed. If it's restricted, then you can't run any PowerShell scripts on your system. So I suggest you set it to remote signed. So to do that, you set execution policy. Windows is suggesting parameters, but no, oh no, this was to install Chocolately. But anyway, you just do execution policy, remote signed, and then you have to give it local scope, local machine, and you press enter, and then you will set well, you need to be in a console as administrator. To do that, right click on the start bar, a start menu, click terminal as admin right here, and you'll get a console that has admin rights. Actually, I'll do it right now because it's easier. Give me an admin one. Thank you. So yeah, now that we set execution policy so we can run PowerShell, there's some commands. Get service. I have a command prepared already, but let's take it one by one. So basically here I'm saying, hey, I want to get all the services that have a display name that starts with Razer. Basically the star means anything. So I'm just saying it should start with this word Razer, and then anything can follow after it. Press enter, and you're getting all of these. And as you can see, you get a status of the service, of the background service. You get a name for it. This is the Windows name for it. And you get a display name, which is the friendly name that the user sees. And we got a list of services that are running. And then to do more with that, we will pass that to another PowerShell command, which is select object. Basically what select object does is from the output of the first command, because this is a pipe. What this pipe does says, hey, take whatever this command outputted and give it to this command as the input. So basically we're going to take the whole list that gets service outputs and give it to this select object command, and we're saying from all this information, I just want name, display name, and status in that order. So if I press enter now, as you can see, we have name, display name, and status. So we got the running service. I mean, right now there's no condition for status, but we got all the Razor services and we display them nicely with name, display name, and status. The next step for this would be to stop all these services in a single move. And for that, I have made a little script. It goes like this. Don't worry about this top part. This is only needed if you want to run this script in a non-admin terminal. But if you run the terminal as administrator, this doesn't matter. And what we're doing here, basically the same command. We're taking the list of all the services that start with Razor, and we're putting them in the services variable. A variable basically is a slot of memory. We're storing the whole list that we saw over here. Now, this whole list, we are storing it in this $services variable. And then what we do, you go for each line in that services list. If the service status, because we have status up here, we are outputting status. If the status, basically that's what this means. If the status is running, then we're gonna do a stop service. And stop service is another PowerShell command. You can do it manually. Nobody's forcing you to use script. You can do stop service, and then you give it the name. This is not, but I could give it, I don't know, RZ action SVC. This will stop the service. There's more parameters to this. You can do -force, which will force the service to shut down, not wait for anything else. And then there's another one that says pass through, which will output what service got stopped by the stop service command. Because otherwise the stop service command will not output anything. It will not tell you, hey, I stopped it. It will just silently close, but it will stop the service, but it will just silently close. It won't tell you anything. So this is what stop service does. And basically what we're doing in that script is take this list, then go one by one, look at the first service, comparing the status. Is it running? Okay, then stop service. Go to the second one. Is the status running? Yes. Okay, then stop service. Go to the third one. Is it running? If yes, then stop service. That's basically what this script means. We're taking the list of services, putting it in services, and then for each service in that list, we're checking, hey, this service status, does it equal running? If yes, stop service. Then will go to the next service and to the next service, and it will parse this entire list. It will go through each of these entries in the list, check the status, and call stop service on each of these services. And now let's see how it runs, right? To run it, we're just gonna have to, this is an admin PowerShell, so I just go stop Razor, boom, and see it outputs stopped Razor, stopped Razor, stopped Razor, stopped Razor. This one's giving an error, cannot stop service on computer, but it's lying. The service is indeed stopped. See, there's no running Razor service up here. And they are set to automatic because I do let them boot up on start on Windows boot, because I want the devices to sync color. But then you can stop the services and the colors will still stay synced, which is great. And I think that's it. Showed a bit of terminal. Don't be afraid of terminal. It's not scary. It's very helpful. So basically, if you save this this little PowerShell script as stop razor.ps1, PowerShell scripts have an extension of ps1. Then you just run that in an administrator PowerShell terminal. It will just go through all the Razor services and stab each and every one of them. And then everything's not running in the background, which is what you want. If you want this. I mean, I'm just showing how you can automate closing services that you don't want. Yes, you can set them to disable and they will never run then, or set them to manual and they will only run when they're needed. But in my case, I want this to start automatically at every Windows boot, and then I want to stop them manually, because they do some things when they start up to sync my devices, and then I don't need them anymore. I can just close them. And that's why I'm doing it like this. But this was just a demo of how you can manage services with PowerShell, with the services UI, services.msc, with the services UI if you want to change the startup type for them, or with just Task Manager if you just want to go to services and stop a bunch of them. And that's it for me for this video. I will have more videos following the Windows Power User series. This was just the first one I thought about, because I don't know if people know the sea of background services that runs in the background on Windows, and most of them are for the Adobe ones, the Razer ones, the, I don't know, Office ones. I usually turn those off, don't need that. And that's another way to maybe make your computer run faster, to close the services that you don't need from various 15 applications that you installed. If you set them to manual and disable them from running Task Manager from startup apps, disable here, set their services to manual, you're done. Also, with the script from PowerShell, you don't necessarily need to do stop service. You can also, there's also a set service command here that can change that execution policy. Basically set service to run manual, automatic, or disable. You can do that here too, but in my case I just did stop service because that's what I want to do. Of course, you can Google a bunch of service related commands with PowerShell. I'm just making this video to get you started with PowerShell and see how easy it is compared to mouse clicks to each and every, if it's 5 services, go to each and every one of them, stop, right click stop, right click stop, right click stop. Nah, just make a script, run it, you're done. Kills everything you need. And I think that's it. Yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Have a good night, day, morning, or whatever time is it there, and cheers.